Hi, everyone. Turn this on 1 second. Okay. Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Thumbs up. Okay. I'm from frigid New Jersey. So it's good to see everyone. And today, I want to talk about something a little bit different. Until now, we've been highlighting, thank you everyone for coming. We've been highlighting different aspects of learning and how we learn Tanakh and how we develop Musar and we develop your personality. And I want to talk about something that may sound like ideology and politics, but it's part of Firmkeit. And I want to discuss that methodology, how we go about building Avas Yisrael and how we go about building Avas Eretz Yisrael. So, and we have a special guest star who's going to join us in about 20 minutes, but I'm not going to tell you who he is, but you'll just have to wait. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. The Gemara in Shabbos says that when a person goes to Shemayim, so they'll be asked a battery of questions. And one of the questions that Kadosh Baruch Hu will ask you and me is, were you honest and ethical? First question. Integrity, moral conscience. Number two is, did you learn Torah? We like learning Torah. Hopefully, next year is an opportunity for you to build your life around Torah. You'll be Rabbanim, Mirza Hashem, some of you. You'll be doctors, you'll be financiers, you'll be engineers, you'll be Indian chiefs. Whatever you'll be, hopefully, Talmud Torah will be part of that menu. And in order for Talmud Torah to be a lifelong pursuit, you need the skills and the love. Some people say, am I coming to Israel to get the love of learning or the skills of learning? Here's a wake-up call. You need both. You may fall in love with it when you're 17 and 18 because you're still impressionable and everyone around you saying, yeah, and you're shaking your head and you're learning. And then you're 25 and you're in some room somewhere by yourself in the city and no one's watching and no one's shaking. And all of a sudden you have to really have the skills to learn so that you can learn in a meaningful way so you continue to love. So next year, make sure you pick up the skills. We do a good job with that. And also you see people who deeply love learning and are committed to learning. And then you start to ask yourself, why is this such an important part of my life? And the Gemara goes through all these aspects that, oh, I'm frozen. Gemara goes through all these aspects that you'll be asking. One of the questions is Tzipisa Yeshua. Namely, did you wait for Mashiach? Did you have the sense that you live in five towns, you live in Teaneck, you live in White Plains, you live in New Rochelle, you live in wherever you live, Florida, wherever you live, that's not where Jew is meant to live. Jew is meant to live in a different world, in a different place, in a different system, not a democracy, but Malchus Yisrael, Melech HaMashiach, not by wearing tefillin 40 minutes a day, but by wearing tefillin all day, which is what we'll return to one day. And do you have the ability to not just live in your current reality, which is what a Jew does? A Jew isn't a coward. A Jew doesn't flee from reality. He embraces and tries to improve his reality. But we know that we belong somewhere else. Sipita Yeshua. That's the fourth question the Gemara in Shabbat on Daf Lamed Aleph claims that we'll all be asked when we get to Shemayim. Now, for thousands of years since we left Yerushalayim, that mitzvah, that charge, that duty was just mental. Okay, do you think about Mashiach? What could your great-great-great-great-grandfather have done in Poland, in Germany? Not going to start an army, not going to go to Israel and build a country. Jews were landlocked. They couldn't move away from where they were. They were stuck in shtetls. They were stuck with being persecuted. So the question is, do you realize that one day, do you sing Ani Mamin with a lot of kavana? But now, in our century, all of a sudden, that question takes on a whole different complexion. Because we, for some reason, you and me, I'm a little older than you, but we still inhabit the same span of time. We're in the same time on this planet. We've been given the opportunity to actively build the future, not just to wait passively for something to happen, but to put facts on the ground and to build cities and to settle the land and to build the country. And some people believe, and they're probably not on this Zoom, that it's not really our responsibility because this isn't really God's hand. Because if it were God's hand, then it would be more religious and all the leadership would be from and everyone would be keeping halacha. And many people feel that we're still in that waiting and holding pattern like we were. I don't believe that. If you're on the Zoom, you probably don't believe that either. Or you've been raised, your parents, your Rabbanim, your Abbeim, is that this is the time for action, and Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wants human beings to be part of that. And that's today's conversation. How do we make you feel part of that? You call that Israel, I call that history making. Now, history making happens in Israel, but it's not going to happen that way for all of you. We'll talk about this a little later. I hope and dearly, dearly, dearly pray. It is my dear, dear wish that every single boy that comes to Yeshiva Haretzion makes Aliyah. That would be my greatest dream. But life's complex, and you know that, and I know that. And your parents are living where they live, not because they're losers, God forbid, not because they're anti-Zionists, God forbid, because of all sorts of factors. And that, by the way, the longer you wait, the more complicated life becomes. So for people that really want that clear landing path to Israel, the easiest way, I'm not saying you should do that. I'm saying the easiest way to assure you get to Israel is to move to Israel as quickly as possible. And that's empirical. But I don't like using the word Israel because it makes it sound like an ideology and Bnei Akiva and a flag waving. It's frumkeit. It's part of being an Oved Hashem. To me, part of being an Oved Hashem is learning Torah. Part of being an Oved Hashem is davening. Part of being an Oved Hashem is chesed. Part of being an Oved Hashem is midos improvement. And part of being an Oved Hashem is your commitment to our land and our people in this moment in history. Land and people in this moment in history. Some people will call that Zionism. I hate cliches, so I just try to get to the bottom of issues. Zionism raises this issue and that assumption and this image. I like to call it people, land, destiny in Israel. How can you be part of it? And I think it's part of our frumkeit. And the question is, what happens in Yeshivat HaRetzion? Why is this something that's important to us? And how do we make it happen? But before I discuss how we make it happen, I'll tell you about three things that I think we work very hard on. It's very important to us, very important to us. Our goal, as I said before, is that every single one of you should move to Israel. That would be my dream come true. If I had a magic wand, I could just wave it. But it's not the world we live in. There's a beautiful medrash, and I wanted this to be a shiur, not just me talking to you. There's a beautiful medrash where Moshe Rabbeinu is davening to Hashem, trying to get into Israel in Parashas V'eschanan. And according to our Chazal, he davens 500 tefillos. Can you imagine 500 tefillos just to be granted entry into Eretz Yisrael? And at a certain point, Hashem says no, and he continues to refuse his request. At which point Moshe says, you know what, I have one last tefillah up my sleeve. What tefillah does Moshe have up his sleeve? Moshe says, I have been carrying Yosef's bones around for the last 40 years in Mitzrayim. And since I took him out of Mitzrayim in Parshas Beshalach. And Yosef's bones, of course, are entering the land of Israel. So if I don't get to enter because of my own merits, at least let me enter because I'm carrying Yosef's bones, because I'm Yosef's pallbearer. So at least let me come in. Very compelling argument, right? You don't deserve to come in for yourself for whatever reason, but at least come in because I'm carrying Yosef's bones, and Yosef's bones are buried in Shechem. And Hashem tells Moshe something really, and never forget this. Hashem tells Moshe, you know what? At a certain point, you're right, but you're wrong. You're right because you and Yosef, neither of you really lived in Israel. Moshe never lived in Israel. Yosef lived there for 17 years, whoopee-doo, but he never really lived there. His life, his career, his identity was Egyptian. So you both lived outside of Israel. And that's the premise of your argument, Moshe. If you both lived outside of Israel, yet Yosef enters, even though he never lived there, why shouldn't I enter? Why shouldn't you enter, Moshe? And Hashem tells Moshe, yeah, Yosef never really lived in Israel, but he acknowledged that he belonged in Israel. And throughout Parshas Vayeshev and Miketz, he's always being called an Ivri. Ivri means I'm from somewhere else. When Avram's called an Ivri, he's from the other side of the river. He's from Iraq and Iran, the other side of the Euphrates River, the Jordan River. When Yosef's called an Ivri, he's in Egypt. He's from the other side of the desert. Remember, the scene has shifted south by the end of Sefer Bereshis. The beginning of Bereshis is in Israel. The end of Bereshis is south. So Ivri means not from the other side of the river, but from the other side of the desert. But either way, he belongs somewhere else. And when the wife of Potiphar says, oh, you brought this rapist, she says, you brought an Ivri to rape me. And when Yosef tells Paro, I was stolen from the house of the Ivrim. So he looked Egyptian, and he dressed Egyptian because that's where he lived, but he knew, and everyone else around him knew, he was part of some other land. And Moshe has that one opportunity when he meets the daughters of Yisro after he saves them and rescues them from these aggressive shepherds, and they introduce him to their father, his future wife amongst them, And they say, Ish Mitzri Hitzilanu. An Egyptian man rescued us. And Moshe should have slammed his fist and say, I'm not an Egyptian. I'm a Jew. I dress Egyptian. I live in Egypt. I grew up in the palace. I'm there. I live here, but my heart is there. And Hashem tells Moshe, you failed that test that Yosef passed. So Yosef's bones can pass and you don't. And the language of the Medrash is, Hashem tells Moshe, Yosef, hodeh bi'artzo, acknowledge that he lived in Israel, even though he didn't live in Israel. Moshe, you weren't modeh bi'artzo because of this one moment. That's our goal in Yeshiva. As I said before, abracadabra, hocus pocus. I made Aliyah. Baruch Hashem, all my kids live in Israel. We're dying for all of you to join us and come home. But we know the realities of at least today's world is that not everyone's going to burn their passport the second they land. Not everyone's going to cut the cord and put on their sandals the second they land in Israel. They have parents. Who knows what's going to happen? Life is very, very unpredictable, as you'll start to see when you grow up. But we want every single boy to live Israel in their heart and to know that even if you're living in New York, White Plains, Teaneck, Five Towns, Pittsburgh, whatever, your heart's in Israel and your reality's in Israel. And the question is, how do we do that? How does Yeshivat HaRetzion assure that this will happen? That's our goal. Our goal is abracadabra, burn your passport and live in Israel. But that's unrealistic for all the boys that come. But every boy that comes, what does the passport of your heart say? Not the passport in your back pocket, but what does your heart tell you? And you know, take a second, everyone. Think about the people in your community, maybe your parents, who don't live in Israel, but they're the people that live Israel really deeply. They're the ones in shul that like everyone goes and talks to about Israel. And they're the ones that feel and breathe Israel. They're the ones, it could be your parents, but that's what we're trying to turn you into, those types of people. Hopefully you'll be in Israel, but if not, hopefully you'll realize that you're not a complete Oved Hashem. You have a long beard, big black hat, know a lot of Shas, Daven and Shemon Esrei, like, I don't know, Leo Navi. But if Israel's not part of that equation, and again, listen to the words I'm using. I specifically don't use the word Zionism. If I were made principal of SAR for a day, principal of Kushner for a day, principal of whoever else is here, of Melvin J. Berman for a day, and I only had one single executive decision to make. They were given one shot, like a draft pick. You know what I would do? I would take Israel history and Zionism and all that you study, hopefully. Okay, and I would make it part of Limudei Kodesh, not in the afternoon from 3:30 to 4:30. Because by sectioning it off from 3:30 to 4:30, it becomes an ideology that Mrs. Grossman teaches you about Herzl and Ben Gurion. And to me, it's part of Firmkeit. It's part of, like, why is it different than Gemara? Why is it different than Tanakh? Why is it different than davening? I just came out. Okay, there's a chance for me to hawk my book, Volume 2 of Reclaiming Redemption, about trying to find a way. 652 pages. So if you read this, you're into Gush. You don't have to pass the Bechira. Good luck to you, right? We'll find you in a mental asylum. But whatever. That's my crusade. It's Frumkeit. Stop using Zionism. Stop looking at kippah. I wear black kippah. Whoopity do, because I don't have that much hair on my head. So I want to cover as much of it as possible so people can't notice. Like, who cares? I love Israel. My son's serving Israel. I want to build our people. Stop getting involved in all the Zionism and ideology. And I know it's important when you're young, but it burns in my heart and burns in my soul, my people, my land, my future, my history. How do we do it? And it's really important because a lot of boys, I think looking at the boys here, you're pretty nuanced and sophisticated group. But I've met boys who say, yeah, it's going to go to Hesder and then I'll figure it out afterwards. Not all Hesders are the same. They're obviously all structured the same, but Hesders have different ways in which the Israelis and the Americans play out and what type of staff they have. And I'm not going to tell you about the other Hesder yeshivas because that's not my place. But those of you who visited, you know there's a difference. And the differences are sometimes make other places preferable. I'm not saying there's only one yeshiva in town. God forbid there should only be one Hesder yeshiva because we can't handle every single boy. There needs to be differences in different groups. So one of it is how deeply you believe in Hesder. do the Rabbanim all send their kids to Hesder? Or do the Rabbanim who teach in the yeshiva basically teach in the yeshiva, but their real hashkafa, which is their license? I'm not here to degrade or defame their hashkafa, but their real hashkafa is more yeshivish, and they'll send their kids somewhere else. That's a big difference. Some of you go to high schools in which your rebbeim don't agree with hashkafa of the high school they teach in, which is fine. I'm not blaming anyone. It's a communal fault, not a crime of the Rebbe. The Rebbe wants to make a living. He's a good Rebbe. He teaches. Unfortunately, our community doesn't always produce enough machanchen. So we have to subcontract out to other communities, and then you get an odd situation, which the Rebbe that you love learning from speaks hashkafa that you don't always. That's what I went through. I went through a Haredi high school, and I loved the learning, and I loved the Rebbeim, but so much of me was missing because when the Rebbe started talking about whatever, Israel or I had to sneak out of the bathroom. Literally, I climbed out of the bathroom window to go to rallies for Soviet Jews because it was the end of the 70s, early 80s. They were rallying. And you know where we weren't allowed to go? Because there were girls at the rally. Girls. There were 100,000 people at the rally. But it became such a voodoo and boogeyman. I had to literally climb out of the window. My parents were waiting for me in the car. Like I said, like, this isn't me. I should be at the rally and I should be able to walk through the front door. So now, it's not as extreme in Israel, but you do have Hesder yeshivas in which legitimately some of the Rebbeim don't fully believe in Hesder, and they won't send their kids there, even though they teach there. So when you have an institution that's unabashedly pro-Hesder, and unabashedly pro-Israel, unabashedly pro-Tzava, it creates an institution. A lot of you, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, don't know what I'm talking about because in 2026, Baruch Hashem, there are so many institutions that have Rabbanim that are pro-Israel and pro-Hesder. But I'm not going to start naming names on this group, but some of you don't. And some of you are still in schools in which they're great rebbeim, but that's just not their thing. And you're smart enough to know who you are and smart enough to know, what that means to you when you're sitting in front of a rebbe who you love and adore and he's great, whatever, but just he's not in your place. And when you start talking about things like Israel, they show agreement, but it's not necessarily as deeply within their neshama. So that's an important part of the yeshiva. And some Hesders have that, some don't. As sophisticated consumers, you know what the differences are. I think the more important issue, and it's hard if you haven't been in Israel to visit, and if you haven't, then maybe speak to someone in your school who has been, because the word that everyone uses about Hesder, and then the word, they're all integrated. What degree of integration? That's a really important issue, and you pay prices for it. I was talking over Shabbos, like we don't really have a dress code. Which means, let's say, I'm Shai, because I know your father, and I know Shai's from Manchester, and I know Shai goes to a yeshiva where there's a really strict dress code because it's more yeshivish. And Israelis just aren't into it. Israeli kids, the biggest Talmid Chacham in the base Medrash is dressed like Moshe. Moshe, you're overdressed for Gush, or for any other Israeli yeshiva for that matter. But they happen to know Shas in their fingertips, and they happen to daven like the Vilna Gaon, and they happen to be, thermos kid on the block. And some Hesder yeshivas, you walk in, and the Americans are still dressing the way Americans dress in Americans high school, whether it's the yeshiva's dress of white shirt and black pants, or the American modern Orthodox dress of collars. But if we really, and I don't think I would love a world in which Americans continue to dress with collars, because I think it's part of your culture and part of where you come from. But we will never, ever take steps to divide Americans from Israelis, because once we do that, then we're basically ruining ourselves. We want this to be one yeshiva. I had a conversation with someone over Shabbos, and they said, do you think that now that high schools have started to ban cell phones in school, like what are the American programs going to do in Israel? I said, it's a really interesting question, but it's a question that applies to every single yeshiva in Israel except for one, except for Gush. Why? Because I would love to think about that question for you guys, because I think it's an important question, really. I'm being honest with you. But these Israeli kids in a million years aren't going to take it. These guys have fought in Asa for 2 years. They had their cell phones in their tanks. They use those cell phones to track terrorists or to get information. And if I can't welcome Uriah, well, I'll introduce you in a second. If I can't make a policy for Israelis, then I don't want to split and make a separate policy for Americans and overseas kids. So to a degree, you do pay prices for that. But another example, Yeshivat HaRetzion, I'm trying to talk to your kids honestly as I can. Yeshivat HaRetzion, the highlight of the week is Shir Klali. where Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, Rav Baruch Gigi, Rav Yaakov Meidan give a 2.5 hour shir for the entire yeshiva, 5 pages of Makaros on a sugya. How many of you guys stand a chance to understand that? Now we're going to help you and push you and help you. We'll try, and we always have the meeting amongst the overseas staff. Maybe we should run parallel programming. Maybe when there's a shir klali, let me give us some shir for the Americans that they'd love going to. And the answer is always no, because by creating separate programs, we're creating separate yeshivas. And by creating separate programs, Matzei Shabbos, so I'm being as honest as I can, are willing to pay a price educationally, whether it's guys that won't learn on Tuesday because they're not going to shir klali or whatever, or whether it's dress code or whatever, or with migdalos. I mean, I'm not talking to girls now, but Israeli standards of tznius are a little different than American standards of tznius. So you could try to create separate codes, separate programs, separate opportunities, and then have ways for the American and English boys to have lunch once a week or chavrusis once a week. But then you're creating the feel that you're in separate yeshivas. And we won't do that. And that's a bridge too far for us, because we want you to spend a year. And our ideal is, in an ideal state, I shouldn't have a job. I mean, I teach Israelis anyway, but our ideal state is there shouldn't be any American Rebbeim. That's the way it was when I went to yeshiva. You get a key and you get a room and you're totally sink or swim. But the reality is caught up with us, and we realize that you need people that understand your culture, understand where you're coming from, understand where you're going to. But our ideal is that I don't have a job as an American Rebbe. That's how we see, just like our ideal is that you make Aliyah. But given the realities, we're working within those contexts. So the second way we do that is not just that the hashkafa is pro-hesder unabashedly, but number two is that we are very careful not to create segments in the program. All the program Shabbos are for the whole yeshiva. The Kiddush is for the whole yeshiva. The Shir Klali for the whole yeshiva. Shabbos, there's no signs in English. All the signs up, for Tiolim, Hebrew, Hebrew, Hebrew. So that you feel that for a year or two, you're living not in a program for Americans or an American program embedded in yeshiva. As best as we can, given the limitations, you are living in Israel. And the third part, and then I'm going to pass it off to Uriah, who joined us. Uriah, we'll introduce him in a second. And this is really where we shine. In a lot of you who are applying to Hesders, let's say, the Hesders that you're thinking of, let's say, aside from Gush, and if Chas Hashem, you don't get accepted to Gush, you have to go somewhere else. So you're thinking about Shalavim and Akotel and Karen Biavna, those are the standard Hesders that you apply to. Israeli kids like you are not applying to those 4 yeshivas. Israeli kids like you at your tier, T-I-E-R, are applying to Gush, not in this order. Malay Adumim, Yerucham, Otniel, Arot Shaul. Those are the biggies. I mean, missing one here or there, but those are the big popular Israeli yeshivas. Which means that Gush is really the only yeshiva amongst the American Hesder programs, Gush, Karen Biavna, Shalom HaKotel, where you walk into the yeshiva and you're looking at yourself right across the aisle. If you had made Aliyah 10 years ago with your parents, you would be applying to Gush, Karen Biavna, Shalom HaKotel, you'd be applying to Gush, Otniel, Yerucham, Maladim, or whatever. And because the kids that you're encountering are at your tier, at your level, they're demographically your level. Like, for example, in some Hesder yeshivos, the demographic is very, let's say, non-Ashkenazi. We would wish for more, but you're meeting a lot of kids that come in living from Efrat and from Ranana and from Beit Shemesh, and they came from Teaneck, and they made Aliyah from White Plains, from Silver Spring, and even if they didn't, like Yochi Applebaum in Silver Spring, like he could have been an American if his parents had stayed. And our goal is that your friendships, more important than the ideology, more important than the structure of the program, if you leave Yeshivat HaRetzion without 5 really good Israeli friends, I wouldn't say we failed. I don't like using the word failure, but like we haven't been as successful. Because in the end, and we'll go back to what I said in the beginning, people that live Israel very deeply, and you know them in your communities, your parents, your friends, your uncle, whatever, it's because they have people in Israel they know, not ideas. If you connect to Israel through Jerusalem Post, and it's all about Netanyahu, Bennett, and whatever. But if you have friends and family in Israel, then you live the experience through them. And if, Chas v'shalom, you don't make Aliyah seriously, in 5 years, when you're back in college, my dream is that late at night, in between your coursework, you're not just chatting and WhatsApping some friends in Columbia or Penn or University of Maryland or Hawaii, wherever they are. You're WhatsApping kids in their tanks on the Lebanese border or in Gaza or in the training base or in Bar Ilan. And you'd be surprised how long these relationships last. You'll go in for their kids' bar mitzvahs, and when they come to America, you'll host them. And all of a sudden, you'll be connected and bonded to Israel. When you come, you're not going to stay in some hotel, eating fancy schmancy breakfasts, but you'll stay in an Israeli neighborhood, shopping in the Makolet, because you'll know people there. You'll go to their house for Shabbos rather than eating in hotels. And don't worry, hotel food is good. Nothing against hotels, but it'll just be a different experience. You won't be a tourist. You'll feel that you belong because you have people. And that's really the secret sauce of Yeshivat HaRetzion. And I'll pass it off in a second to Uriah Durrani. That's why last year, 34 boys from our overseas program drafted. 34. No Hesder Yeshiva has ever sniffed that amount. And I can say a word about it. I hope I'm a good speaker and a great rebbe and a great inspiration, yada, 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 but it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with the fact that the boys felt so connected to everyone else as friends. And why in the world are they joining the army? And more or less, I would hope, I don't know the statistics, but I would hope that at least 80% of our year asks that question of themselves at some point. Like, why am I not drafting? And there are a million good answers to that question. No one's going to railroad you into drafting. But to me, that's a sign that you really see yourself in that way. You're not a tourist with your American passport going back to University of Maryland to watch the Redskins, the Commanders, whatever. But this is your land. It's our land together. Why in the world are you not responsible the same way an Israeli is? And the answer is because my parents, because my college, whatever, a million different answers. But asking that question is a sign of achievement, that you're even asking that question. I think a very high degree of kids in yeshiva ask that question. And I'm proud of them when they ask that question. Kids you weren't expected. Kids who were more yeshivish, who come from backgrounds where their minds were 2 years learning and then going to become YU which we also support. But that type of question is extremely, extremely healthy. Anyway, what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce you to Uriah Durrani because we take Army enlistment very, very seriously. And this was not a conversation about Army, it's about Israel, but now we're segueing into drafting an Army. And I want him to describe to you what we try to do to make the process easier that's different from other yeshivas, because we're trying to help you see what, in my mind, if Gush stacks up for you, and it may not, and if you're accepted, and you may not be, but if Gush stacks up for you, and the X's and O's make sense, and you're accepted, and you're interested in making Aliyah / going to the Army, it would be a foolish decision not to come. Because the differences between segueing into Israel / Army in Gush and in other Hesders are miles apart, more so than in many of the other areas that we've been speaking about the last couple of weeks. There, the differences are huge. So if you're not Army Israel, you can listen, whatever, be fascinating to hear what Uriah has to say. But if you are, listen carefully. Uriah is our dedicated madrich for helping you through the Army. We dedicate a madrich to help you through the process and while you're in the Army. And I want him to share with you, I'll be in the background, I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to share with you how he sees this whole thing. And you can continue, or I'll ask you at the end to put your WhatsApp number on the chat, and then they can be in touch with you. But Uriah, originally from Maimonides, so big cheer out for Boston.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. I only connected to the last couple of minutes, but we are for sure going to connect to the last ideas that Rav Tergen spoke about. We're for sure going to connect to that. But before that, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Uriah Durrani. I am currently in my 9th year in Yeshiva, Shir Tet. Originally from Boston, I went to Maimonides and graduated and came Shana Aleph to Yeshiva. From there, drafted in August of 2019, served as an officer in a special combat reconnaissance unit, which we drafted to through Hesder. But I extended my service as an officer and came back to Yeshiva through the Rabbanu program. And I am now the Achrai Chayalim Bodedim for the past couple of years, supporting the lone soldiers and the lone soldier program that we have in Yeshiva. A little bit about the job itself. And I think through that, we can kind of get an idea of how we try to support our Chayalim Bodedim. The way I like to look at it is kind of pre-draft, during the Army, and post-draft. So pre-draft, there's a lot of different steps that need to be taken, both on the emotional level and the emotional support of like the feelings that come up right before the draft, and also more on the technical level of, okay, well, what documents do I need to send in? By when should I send it in? And I really hold your hand throughout that whole process. And it's not just me. There's also Michal Lender, who's in the office, who does a phenomenal job sending in all the documents on time and being in touch with all the different Army programs that need a Machal and Meitav. And she has people working from the inside, and it's amazing to see her work. So that's kind of more on the technical side. But even just through the decision-making process that starts in Shana Aleph, just by being in an environment of Israelis and being surrounded by other Americans who are also considering it, and having those conversations with your peers, and having those conversations with your Rabbeim and your parents and your friends, and also with me, and just being another voice as someone who went through the process as a lone soldier, who knows what it's like. So that allows for me also to give the support, and also to have the conversation. What are really the thoughts that should be going while through that process. So that's pre-draft. Then you have during the draft, I have the zchut of giving a lot of sweaty hugs to a lot of sweaty chayalim during their masaot and during all their high moments, and being there for them. And it's really an amazing thing to just see the smiling faces and the feeling of accomplishment at every single tekes. So really, as a zchut, I see it as such a zchut to be at every single tekes of our chevra, to make sure that everyone has a familiar face in the crowd. Because there are some times when your parents won't be able to make it, and you will just want to see someone that you know. And it's not just me; it's a ton of chevra from Yeshiva, and it's an amazing thing to see the support for the Chayalim Bodedim during their high achievements, during their tkasim in the army. And lastly, it's post-army, the smooth transition and kind of being there for you back when you come in the middle of Shir Daled. Post-army, I think now in the past couple of years, it's been an even more extreme transition. It's been a very complicated transition coming back from war, back to Yeshiva. Baruch Hashem, I had the zchut of doing it a couple of times, also in Sadir and also in Miluim. And every single time back from Miluim back to Yeshiva, it's a process. And it's for sure something that does need some accompaniment. And so just there as another person to support during that process of coming back to Yeshiva. So that's a little bit about my job and how I can help support the Chayalim Bodedim. But it's not just me. Again, as I mentioned, there are so many people who are involved in this amazing project. And we spoke about Michal in the office, who helps with so many of the technical issues. There's also Rav Moti, who's been at his job for years, and his connection with the army and through the Hesder, and he deals with the army for the whole yeshiva and the Israelis also. And he has phenomenal connections that he can use, and he speaks to, and he can help out wherever he can. But that's all nice and important. But even more important than that, I would say, is the kind of the sense of family and the support that you get, not only from the yeshiva, but from the yeshuv. So when you're in the army as a lone soldier, you can choose whatever's right for you. You can choose whether you want to have a mishpacha ma'ametzet, a adoptive family, and live in Ra'anana, Yerushalayim, anywhere, or you can choose to stay in yeshiva. And there are a little bit of a fancier pnimiyot that we recently got renovated for the Chayalim Bodedim that have a little kitchenette and a sitting area and a living room, air conditioning, really like everything that a person will need. And in addition to that, we find adoptive families within the yeshuv, so that you always have a home cooked meal. That when you come for Shabbat, it's not just having the yeshiva food, which is objectively it's pretty good food. I've been having it for 9 years. It's pretty good. I don't know how long Rav Tarragon has had it for, but it's very it's good food. But in addition to that, much better food is the family vibe and family singing and Shabbat table that you can really have with the Mishpacha Ma'ametzet in the Yeshuv, and to get to know more Israeli families that they love. They're just always asking for more Chayalim Bodedim that they can host, and they can kind of be that adoptive family too. So it's really such a beautiful thing about the Yeshuv, and also such an amazing opportunity to kind of go out of the yeshiva walls and to have that extra familial support while also staying in yeshiva and connecting and staying connected to Torah throughout your army service. Going back to what Rav Tarragon was speaking about earlier, I think that's such an amazing and also crucial point about drafting with the Gush is that Shana Bet, or should I say Shir Bet, you're already a year with Israelis learning Torah with them in Shir. And those same Israelis that you've been learning with and speaking to with in Hebrew are the same Israelis that you're drafting with. So it's not that you've been in a totally separate program and now you're drafting with a ton of Israelis that you don't know. These are your chavrutas, these are your friends, and now you're drafting with them and taking that kesher and taking that connection to another level of both learning and now also serving, and then coming back with those same chevra, Shir Dalet, Shir Hey, and coming back to learning it. It's such an amazing process, and those are really such deep connections and friendships that are built. And at the same time, every year, Rav Tega mentioned last year, 34, but even before last year and the war and everything, there was always double digits of Americans who are drafting. So in addition to the general Shir Bet and Chevra that you have, there's also like a smaller, tighter group of Chevra who are really going through the same experience of being lone soldiers together and serving in Tzahal while also being lone soldiers. And that's really like an amazing friendship. Those are really some of my closest friends that I still have till today. It's just the tight-knit group of Americans going through the same experience, while also, of course, having that broader connection with the other Israelis in the Shir, as we mentioned. Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of good, and it's really an amazing opportunity to serve in Tzahal. So if this is something that you're considering, you do want to think about, you don't want to think about it now, you're going to want to think about it in Shana Aleph, feel free to speak to me even before getting accepted or even before coming to Gush. More than happy to talk about Israel, Aliyah, Army, Machal. Is it right for me? Is it not right for me? How to even approach deciding whether it's right for me or not right for me. I'll leave my number in the chat. And really feel free to reach out. More than happy. Even if you end up in a different yeshiva, I'm more than happy to help in any single way possible. So I'll send my number in the chat. Do we want to take any questions? Do we have time?
No. If they go to another yeshiva, they don't get your help. I told you to say that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll write my number now. Do we have time for questions? Do we want? Yeah. Do we have questions? Okay.
Thank you, Uriah. You're a real rock star in yeshiva. And thank you to, there's Uriah's number. And one thing I'll tell you.
It's an Israeli number, so you just can't put the +972. Okay.
A lot of boys are coming from Boston, so you guys are going to have to get used to Boston accents next year. That's why Uriah decided to join. Okay, but we're going to Bostonize you guys a little bit, but could be worse things. Could be worse things than 10 SAR or 10 DRS. It could be worse things than that. Anyway, everyone, have a great day. Good luck with your tests. I know they're starting this week. Next week, we won't have the session. I'll be in flight, Amir Hashem, going back to Eretz Yisrael. But we will have one more session, and then there's going to be one evening for open mic questions and answers about yeshiva, since you'll already have all of your acceptances. So I'll just be available for, what I call it a closed video session. So you don't have to, no one really knows who you are. You can come on and ask anonymous questions. You don't have to feel embarrassed that people are going to, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? So it's just my chance to give you information. Okay. So next week there's no session. And then we'll have one more session, and then the closed mic, open mic questions and answer session. Okay. And of course, as always, I'll put my number in the chat. If anyone has any questions for me, most of you have my numbers already, but just in case you don't, here's my number, and contact me. And good luck with everyone in your bechinos. I'm in T-Nex. If anyone wants to drive on by with some donuts, I wouldn't be upset about that. So freezing cold T-Nex. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you, Uriah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.